The flood of 1993 is forcing thousands to relocate. Many are staying with friends, others in shelters. These are the most common places. And during the past 2 weeks, some of the victims from the flood have found a most unusual place to call home. Or maybe it's not that unusual. They're staying inside of Noah's Ark Motor Inn, a fitting place considering the biblical proportions of this flood.
But it's an eerie feeling that you need an ark to get to your home, and you're living in a place called Noah's Ark. It's a strange feeling.
Judy Plate and her family moved in after their St. Charles home flooded. They grabbed what they could, and here it sits in the Ark, surrounded by stuffed animals. A menagerie completed in 1973, just before the last big flood. Back then, Noah's Ark also opened its doors to help out.
Well, we don't turn anybody away. If they can pay, they pay. If they can't, we can't. If they need to eat, we feed them.
It's a safe refuge situated 50 feet above the militant Missouri River. More than 25 rooms are filled with families, and they're now familiar stories.
Last week there was 26 inches in the house, and I haven't been out there since, so I'm not sure what's in there now.
It's a hopeless feeling Noah probably experienced himself as he waited for a sign of dry land. In St. Charles, I'm John Pertzborn.
Department on North Main Street. Evacuations are underway in low-lying areas. About 700 people in South St. Louis are leaving their homes this morning. Gas and electricity will be cut today in that area. The new evacuation area is bounded by Interstate 55 on the west, the River de Pere on the south, Kellen on the north to Alabama, Alabama south to Prim, Prim east to Ivory, Ivory south to Pepping, and Pepping east to the orange survey markers. And the only remaining bridge over the Mississippi north of St. Louis area that linked Missouri to Illinois is closed this morning. A levee near Quincy flooded the Bayview Bridge last night, and that triggered a spectacular blaze at a gas station in West Quincy. It's 78 degrees right now in St. Louis.
In our Flood Watch 93 coverage, more people in South St. Louis are getting notices this morning to evacuate. Police have gone door to door, urging some 700 people to voluntarily leave their homes. The new evacuation area is bounded by Interstate 55 on the west, River de Pere on the south, Kellen on the north to Alabama, Alabama south to Prim, Prim east to Ivory, and Ivory south to Pepping, Pepping east to the orange survey markers. Gas service in this area will be shut off beginning in just about 3 minutes. Electricity will be shut off at 8 o'clock tonight. Volunteers are still needed to sandbag along River de Pere, and if you are interested, you should register at Bishop DuBourg High School. Well, one North St. Louis County community is also asking for sandbagging volunteers this weekend. Some families have already left their homes in Bell Fountain Neighbors, where the Moline Creek and sewer waters are quickly taking over neighborhoods despite more than a week of sandbagging. However, residents will continue their fight this morning, and if you'd like to join the sandbagging efforts there, you should call Bell Fountain Police for directions.
In St. Charles County, an emergency evacuation order has been issued for residents of several mobile home parks. The St. Charles Emergency Management Agency asked people to leave the area, bounded by Hawning Road on the north, St. Croix on the south, Highway 94 north on the west, and North River Road on the east. The evacuation includes Missouri Mobile Manor, Princess Jody Mobile Home Park, and the Bedford Mobile Home Park. And St. Charles officials say floodwaters have been rising rapidly, and those who stay are in danger. Sandbaggers are still needed in the city of St. Charles to help stabilize the levees along North Main Street and behind the McDonnell Douglas Missile Plant on North 94. Meanwhile, hundreds of people have already begun moving out their belongings, and that has created a shortage of space to put all of the furniture and other items.
There's a lot of people calling. A lot of people need more space than we have available, though.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately, but we're fill up until we can.
I guess, is that the story pretty much for, I guess, all the places out here?
I'm sure it is. I've been talking to some of the other managers. I know all the managers of public storage are letting people in. We've had some people come late at night, and the manager's been getting up and getting them in.
Now, if you'd like to help sandbag in St. Charles, you are asked to go to the City Street Department at 340 North Drive. That's off of Highway 94 North.
And that's our 7:55 report.
We'll have another.
A levee breaking on the Mississippi. Floodwaters taking out another 14,000 acres, closing the last bridge for a 200-mile stretch. and triggering this explosion and fire at a gas station. We will have the latest on the flood of the century. Plus, actor Kenneth Branagh.
In Missouri, along this stretch of the Mississippi, are waking up to a disaster this morning they'd very much hoped to avoid. You can see that the mud still covers the railroad tracks here on the Quincy, Illinois side of the river. That's because until last night, they were covered by water. But the water has gone west to the Missouri side because the levee protecting that side has all but disappeared. This was the end of the West Quincy levee and the beginning of a nightmare.
The next thing we heard a pop, and then some guy looked over and saw the trees moving, and then that was all she wrote. Somebody hollered, the levee broke.
The raging waters flooded homes and 14,000 acres of Missouri farmland, and much more dramatically, toppled a nearby gasoline storage tank. For a time Friday night, it seemed the Mississippi was on fire, and the sweat of hundreds of volunteers who battled to save the Bayview Bridge had been for naught.
That's Mother Nature. We're pretty arrogant if we think we're going to control her. You know, I mean, she simply had enough of our futile efforts and showed us who was boss.
High on a bluff, the town of Quincy, Illinois will be spared the flooding, but not the devastation. Now, there are no open bridges across the Mississippi on a more than 200-mile span, stretching from Burlington, Iowa, south to St. Louis, Missouri. No way for workers to get to jobs on the other side of the river. No way even for patients in Missouri to get to Quincy's hospital.
You know, people from Hannibal, a lot of them go to the Quincy Hospital, and there's a lot of small towns over Missouri that rely on the Quincy Hospital.
Everybody's got, you know, a piece in this, and I think there's a lot of sadness right now.
Now you can see that the Bayview Bridge itself is still intact. It's not the bridge that's the problem. It's the roads that have been washed out on the Missouri side. That's why there's no traffic now anywhere along this 200-mile stretch across the Mississippi. Jackie?
David, any word yet on when the bridge will reopen?
No word whatsoever, but certainly weeks, maybe even months. In 1973, the bridge stayed closed for 73 days. You can imagine if that happens again, the effect on commerce here. 40% of Quincy's economy is reliant upon workers from the Missouri side.
How about the residents? Are they obeying the order to get out of the area?
Well, yes, in West Quincy especially. Keep in mind, it's a very rural, not terribly populated area. The water just fanned out across those 14,000 acres. There was an orderly evacuation. The concern now is to make sure that there was no one, any of the volunteers who might have been caught up when the levee swept away, but no reports of injuries or deaths at all here.
Any reports on when they will be able to return?
Well, on the West Quincy side, we can only guess. I mean, it's a clear day today. If it rains some more, obviously it'll pound more rain in that direction. The hope is that within the next several days, the water will begin receding. That was the hope, that the levee wouldn't break in the first place.
All right, thank you, David, for that live report. NBC's David Bloom in Quincy, Illinois. And farther south, in and around St. Louis, the floods have crippled farming. NBC's Ken Lee Jones reports.
The swollen Mississippi and Missouri rivers have created a huge lake that stretches 20 miles north of where they normally come together. The Missouri is overflowing a levee near St. Charles, Missouri, washing away farmland and flooding trailer parks.
That's part of farming down here, I guess.
Farmers are trying to bolster the levee, but with the river still rising, they face an uphill fight. In South St. Louis, the River Des Peres, normally a dry drainage ditch this time of year, is full to the brim. Volunteers have responded to the call for a massive sandbagging effort to beef up the levees.
We're on vacation, so we thought we'd help everybody.
Since I was just sitting around my house, I thought I would come down and help.
Help is what Tom and Jill Scott need to save their home in North St. Louis.
Realistically, what do you think your chances are?
50-50. We're going to make it.
Think so?
We've worked too hard not to.
For more than a week, volunteers, some of them complete strangers, have been building the walls of what they call Fort Scott, a sandbag fortress to hold off the enemy, the rising Mississippi. The battle is still going on. Ken Lee Jones, NBC News, St. Louis.
Meanwhile, President Clinton returns to the flood zone this morning. The president, Vice President Gore, and members of the cabinet will meet with the governors of 9 states hit by the floods.
For flood aid for this area, federal dollars, but it's going to cost a lot more than that. I talked to Governor Mel Carnahan just a few minutes ago. He told me in Missouri alone, he estimates the damage so far is at $2.7 billion. So you can imagine when they sit down to talk today, they're going to have a lot to talk about. You can see Mayor Bosley. Bosley is down there, Mayor Freeman Bosley. They're all waiting to greet the president, who should be getting off the plane shortly. Representative Gephardt is also down there, as well as others from the area who are here to greet the president.
Sarah,
and a large traveling press corps.
Sarah, we know a number of governors are also going to be there today. I mean, they're all going to be there with their hands out. You've had a chance to talk to some of the representatives over the last week or so. I mean, this is getting more costly by the day, isn't it?
Well, it really is, Jeff. And to hear that figure just moments ago from Governor Carnahan, who said in Missouri alone we're up to $2.7 billion. Now, the president has allocated $4.5 billion for the entire region. Some $800 million of that is going to FEMA. $1 billion is going to agriculture. So you can see right there, the money is starting to dwindle away. And Governor Carnahan said the figure was actually shocking. Those were the words he said when he described how much it's going to cost to clean up this area and the damage. We've seen the pictures, the farms, the businesses, the homes. The problem is we're expecting more rain. This is not going to ease up. We're going to be dealing with these floodwaters through August.
And this really, Sarah, is a bipartisan effort, it appears. I mean, we were just looking at the tarmac there. You see the Democratic governor of Missouri and Republican Mr. Talent's also there. I mean, this is Republicans and Democrats. And normally when the president's plane comes in, you see only the members of his party, but just about everybody's involved in this, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, everyone is here. I mean, he's got the members of his cabinet with him. He's got everyone. Just moments ago, I talked to Representative Jim Talent about what he expects from this visit.
And what I'm hoping is that I have a minute to tell him really how bad things are in St. Charles County, particularly since the Missouri River levee broke. And this is by far the worst affected area or county in the area. And if I can just get that message across to him, I figure I'll be successful.
He's freed up federal dollars, but a lot of people say it's not enough. Even the president says don't expect the government to bail you out.
Well, I think what the government can do is to provide some relief for people who have been severely and unexpectedly dislocated, and I think it's going to do that, and that's appropriate. But you're right. There's the most of the economic damage, lost opportunities, lost construction opportunities, river traffic that hasn't been moving. A lot of the value of the agricultural crops never be compensated. That's right.
And that was Representative Jim Talent talking about the president's visit. Once he gets off the airplane, he's going to take an aerial tour by helicopter of the St. Charles area. After that, he's going down to Arnold, Missouri, where he will meet at Fox High School with the governors, the 9 governors we talked about, as well as the members of his cabinet, as well as various members of Congress, including senators and congressmen from this area and from all the states who have been affected by this damage, by the flooding. And we are just waiting for the president to get off the plane. There he is right there, President Clinton, stepping off Air Force One. Of course, he's been in the area before. He was up in Iowa earlier this week. You can see the president there with Vice President Al Gore getting off the plane. Once the president finishes up here today at about noon, he's going to head back to Little Rock. Doesn't have anything on his agenda there, just a little time to go home to his home state. Sarah, President Clinton is meeting with Governor Carnahan right there, shaking his hands. Go ahead.
He sure picked a day to come in and look at the flood damage by air. There's so much going on. Levees breaking overnight, more evacuations, airports closing around the area. He's going to get an eyeful up from the helicopter.
You know, he really is. And I saw some pictures from Iowa earlier this week, and you can really see that he appeared to be affected by what he saw. You know, he's familiar with the Mississippi. It's in his region down in Arkansas. He knows the power of this river. And he saw the Raccoon River up in Iowa. He's going to see the Missouri River, the levees that have been breaking and really just dissolving overnight, threatening all the folks in St. Charles County and St. Charles City. So he is going to see a lot. But really, whether or not that means it's going to turn into federal aid, we don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what happens at this meeting. But again, as I've said, Governor Mel Carnahan says this is a very expensive flood, $2.7 billion alone. The president's going to have to come up with more money to satisfy these governors and to satisfy the people who are affected. We, of course, will keep you updated on the president's visit throughout the day. Complete details on News Channel 5 at 5, 6, and 10 tonight. Until then, reporting live from Lambert, Sarah Harlow, News Channel 5. Back to you, Gene and Jeff.
All right, Sarah, thanks very much.
And that's our special report, but our complete coverage on Flood Watch 93 is next on News Channel 5 at 9.
Stay with us.
St. Louis, where the news comes first. This is News Channel 5 at 9.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Fowler.
And I'm Jean Jackson. Today is Saturday, July 17th, and as you just saw a few moments ago, President Bill Clinton has arrived in St. Louis for a summit on the flooding disaster here in the Midwest.
But before the summit, Clinton and other federal and state officials will be touring flood-damaged area of St. Charles County. Let's go live now, back to Lambert Airport, where Air Force One landed just a few minutes ago, and you can see President Clinton there along with Vice President Al Gore. A number of members of the 6 members of the president's cabinet are also there. They are there, so at this summit at Fox High School later on today, the officials of the different states will be able to question the administration about what kind of help is going to be available to these states.
You can see him shaking hands with St. Louis Mayor Freeman Bosley right now. Several of the local senators and representatives are on hand, as well as Governor Carnahan, who has already shaken the hand of the president. And they will meet at Fox High School with several of the governors from the 8 Midwestern states. Kansas governor cannot be there. She has sent a representative. And of course, those governors will have their hands outstretched, wanting more than the $2.5 billion that the president is proposing in federal aid, but knowing all along that it's going to be quite difficult to get much more from the federal government.
As we talked about a few minutes ago when Sarah was with us, you see Republicans and Democrats standing in that line there. Mel Carnahan, the Democratic governor, is standing next to Representative Jim Talent, a Republican. It is a bipartisan effort. As soon as he gets done in this line, the president, the vice president, and all of the dignitaries are expected to climb on helicopters, which is just a little bit screen left of where you're looking right now. They'll take an hour-long tour of St. Charles County, and then they'll be landing at about 10:15, we understand, at Fox High School in Arnold, and that is where the summit will be held.
And what a tour they'll get. Overnight, we've had levees breaking all over the St. Louis area, more evacuations. Creve Coeur Airport is being flooded. 4 to 5, even 6 feet of water out in that area near Creve Coeur Airport and the MSD plant where the Missouri River is spilled over this levee. They are going to get quite a sight. Iowa was bad, but I don't know if he's prepared for what he'll see here in St. Louis.
Well, I think there is some anticipation that at this meeting today, and again, you're looking at some of the dignitaries, Illinois Governor Jim Edgar there as well, that some of these governors will be telling the administration, giving them preliminary figures on how much all of this is going to cost. We'll talk in a few minutes about the preliminary costs for the state of Missouri, but it's going to run in the billions and billions of dollars, and it'll be the administration's chance to tell them whether the money will be forthcoming.
And it appears the damage is already done in Missouri, and it can be counted in the billions. Last night, Missouri Governor Mel Carnahan told News Channel 5 Missouri flood damage alone totals $2.7 billion. That's more than has already been requested by the president for all of the affected states. But Carnahan says he's glad Clinton is here.
I think it's good that he is here, that he will be able to tour some of it by air, but he has set aside a couple of hours just for interchange with the Midwestern governors and his cabinet, and we'll be able to tell him how vital it is that they continue this mode that they have already been in of quick reaction and to cut through the red tape and get the relief out here where people need it and when they need it.
The floodwaters are expected to crest here in St. Louis Monday. The cresting has already begun in some cities further upriver, and of course we'll have complete coverage of President Clinton's visit to the St. Louis area tonight on News Channel 5 at 5 and 6.
Now to the flood.
Shut down this morning as water from the Missouri River seeps through a sandbag levee there. The earthen levee gave way yesterday just north of New Highway 370 near the Discovery Bridge. Bridgeton police say the Earth City Expressway is now closed both north and south of 370. More people in South St. Louis are getting notices to evacuate this morning.
Police have gone door to door urging some 700 people to voluntarily leave their homes. The new evacuation area is bounded by Interstate 55 on the west, River de Pere on the south, Kellen on the north to Alabama, Alabama south to Prim, Prim east to Ivory, Ivory south to Pepping, and Pepping east to the orange survey markers. Gas service in this area will be shut off began about 8 o'clock this morning. Electricity will be shut off at 8 o'clock tonight.
We're expecting a lot of this water to come in probably tomorrow afternoon or early Sunday. And we want to give people time to do the evacuation.
Volunteers are still needed to sandbag along the River de Pere today. If you're interested, you should register at Bishop DuBourg High School.
As our Floodwatch 93 coverage continues this morning, north of St. Louis, there was only one remaining open bridge linking Missouri and Illinois, and now the flooding has closed that bridge too. When a levee broke, the Bayview Bridge in West Quincy, Missouri was closed, and the levee break also apparently triggered an explosion at a gas station nearby. The area had already been evacuated. There were no injuries reported. With the Bayview Bridge closed, there's no way to cross from Missouri to Illinois for a distance of 200 miles from Alton north to Rock Island.
A 72-year-old St. Louis woman is the latest victim of the flood. She was killed when the car she was driving in went into floodwaters near West Alton. Authorities say Geraldine Fitcher and her husband Andrew were heading south on Highway 67 when he lost control of the car. It veered off the left side of the road into about 12 feet of floodwater. Geraldine Fitcher was pronounced dead at the scene. Her husband was transported by helicopter to a nearby hospital with what officials there say are moderate injuries. It's not yet known why the car left the road. And one North County community is fighting what looks like a losing battle against a swollen creek and backed up sewers.
Still, residents are asking for more sandbagging volunteers this weekend. Some families have already left their homes in Bell Fountain Neighbors, where the Moline Creek and sewer waters are quickly taking over neighborhoods despite more than a week of sandbagging. However, residents will continue their fight this morning, and if you'd like to join the sandbagging efforts there, call Bell Fountain Police for directions. People in DuPont, Illinois are counting on pumps to keep their property dry this morning. Heavy rainfall is flooding the bottomlands. So the Army Corps of Engineers has called for volunteers not only to start sandbagging, but also to get more pumps working. They say with the additional pumps, even more rain would not cause more flooding. We've already mentioned a couple of places that need volunteer sandbaggers, but many of the levees need to be raised or reinforced.
Here are some of the other areas that need help sandbagging this morning. In Jefferson County, volunteers should meet at the Imperial Main exit off Interstate 55. They need help in the Woodlawn subdivision. Also calls for help in South County at New Baumgardner and Hines Road off of Telegraph in Oakville. And in North County at Priggy and Riverview Drive in Spanish Lake. All of these locations are along the Mississippi River.
And meteorologist Paul Williams joins us now to tell us if Mother Nature is going to give us any more trouble with this rain.
Won't give us any problems as far as right here in the immediate St. Louis area. Unfortunately, our neighbors to the north in Iowa, they're already being pelted with moderate to heavy showers as we speak. Let's take a look outside right now. Officially here in the St. Louis area, partly sunny skies, 86 degrees, humidity 70%, winds are out of the south at 3 miles per hour, and the barometer is at 30.00 and steadily climbing. And a couple of things to keep in mind, it may not rain hard or at all here in St. Louis, but we have great concern about it raining again, very heavy up north, rolling that river down our way, and I'll give the latest flood stages coming up later on the show.
So, Paul, if we get a significant amount of rain in Iowa, obviously that's going to work its way down here. Could the height change somewhere in the next few days?
Jeff, it's good that you brought that up, because what you have to experience if we have that much raining up north is a domino type of an effect, once again pushing the crest back a few days. That possibility is still on the horizon because of those heavy showers pelting our neighbors to the north in Iowa, and that entire state has been declared a disaster area. So that gives you an indication just how much rain we're dealing with. It's still sticking around, dry here in the immediate St. Louis area, but still we have to be concerned about that rain up north.
All right, we'll check back, Paul. Thanks.
Thank you. Still to come along the Maryland.
Just shook some hands of some people waiting here. Some folks, apparently friends and family of Secret Service, here to say hello. He's on board Marine One. He will now go over St. Charles County for an aerial tour for about an hour, and then it's down to Fox High School in Arnoldville, where he will meet with 9 governors, representatives from Kansas. The Kansas governor could not be here. He will talk to representatives of the House. He will also meet with some senators to talk about funding, of course, flood damage, the toll, not only monetarily, but in the human factors going up. And the president is going to hear from the governors who are going to want more money. We've already allocated some $2.5 billion for flood damage, but Governor Carnahan says it's going to cost Missouri at least $2.7 billion as of yesterday. And people here are going to simply be asking the president for more money. That meeting is not expected to be a long meeting, about an hour and a half. Then he will head back here to Lambert, where he will take off for Little Rock. As you can see the president, you probably can't see the president, but he's inside the chopper, getting ready to take off.
Sarah, Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It will be interesting as you cover this meeting at Fox High School, this summit in about an hour, to get the president's reaction to what he sees aboard that chopper this morning.
Well, it will be interesting, yeah, to see what he has to say. He was in Iowa earlier this week, but as you said early in the newscast, you know, we've had so much damage here. We're talking several states. I mean, he's really going to get an eyeful just over St. Charles yesterday. The water going over the levees, protecting the city of St. Charles and the county from the Missouri. I mean, it's simply eating away. There's just too much water, and it's not about to recede with a crest coming in St. Charles, I know, on Monday, and that's only if we don't get more rain, which is highly unlikely, as we put in our weather forecast. I mean, this crest could be pushed back who knows how long, and then the water is going to be sticking around at least through August if we do peak next week. So he's going to see a lot, and hopefully he's going to be able to talk to some of the people and really hear what they have to say. You know, you can talk to senators and congressmen and governors, but you really need to talk to the people to hear their personal stories, to know how they're affected by these high waters. And there you see the helicopter is about to take off. We'll have more for you later. Reporting live from Lampert, Sarah Harlan, News Channel 5.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much again. President Clinton on his way to fly over St. Charles. He'll look at the flooding damage there before arriving at Fox High School in Arnold, as Sarah said, at about 10:15 this morning for the flooding summit. And again, we'll have all of the information for you on the president's visit tonight on News Channel 5 at 5 and 6.
And continuing our Flood Watch 93 coverage, along the Merrimack this morning, more homes in Arnold are being threatened. Residents in one neighborhood say they've seen the water come up at least a foot a day. News Channel 5's Dan Gray reports on what they're trying to do to stop it.
City of Arnold work crews were busy tonight delivering more pumps to get water out of basements. The immediate concern is trying to save about 30 nearby homes.
I don't have any in there yet, just seepage. So we're trying to prevent it from going down in there.
It's not just the outside water that's causing problems. Officials say many basements in this neighborhood are flooding because the sewers are backing up.
We're just getting a lot of sewer water. The actual water hadn't got us yet. We're just getting back up from the sewers.
How much water you got in your basement?
We're 2/3 of the way full.
I'm Dan Gray, News Channel 5.
The Army Corps of Engineers will be in that neighborhood today directing sandbagging efforts and pointing out which homes may be threatened next.
Western Missouri became the focus of national attention.
Sunday, the word went out that sections of South St. Louis near the River de Pere would be evacuated and basic services cut off. Evacuations in St. Charles proved too costly for many residents. Flood victims claim they've fallen prey to unscrupulous movers. They say ruthless movers are charging them 10 times what the Red Cross pays to tow their mobile homes to higher ground. In Des Moines, a water plant was knocked out of service after the Raccoon River overflowed and contaminated the entire water supply. The plant serves about 250,000 people. Also on Sunday, the Meat Cutters Union approved a new 6-year contract. The pact includes job guarantees and broadens family medical benefits for some workers. Monday, an Army helicopter carried Vice President Al Gore from Grafton to Limay to check out the damage. His tour brought out politicians from both sides of the river and the national media. Gore says the federal government will help bail out the flood victims. The flood is one of the biggest national stories, and on Monday, that brought network anchor Tom Brokaw and the NBC News crew to town. Strong currents washed a county bridge downriver in Nebraska. A resident who happened to be taking pictures of the river captured the collapse on video. Tuesday, nature added insult to injury as more storms moved into the St. Louis area, adding more rise to the rivers. Also rising were tempers. Many Southside residents living along the River de Pere did not want to evacuate, but the city made staying at home almost impossible by cutting off their power. Mayor Freeman Bosley Jr. was the target of much of the anger. He said he understood their frustration, but he personally did not want to risk the loss of life. Wednesday, President Clinton was surprised how much worse the flooding has gotten since last visiting the Midwest 10 days ago. He cut his Hawaiian vacation short to check out the flood situation in Des Moines, Iowa. The president also took part in a live radio interview broadcast across the Midwest, including Ann Keefe's show on KMOX. A sandbagging operation was underway in the Bella Villa neighborhood near Limay, where hundreds of people showed up to help protect homes and businesses. The The St. Louis City Police, working overtime during the floods, got some help from the National Guard. Members of Missouri's 1137th Military Police Unit helped guard evacuated homes and property in South St. Louis. 22-year-old Giovanni Peoples admitted he burned his 3-month-old daughter with scalding hot water. He says he was upset when he had to clean up after the infant had a bowel movement. The baby was in critical condition, burned over 60% of her body. Thursday, West County residents felt the wrath of Mother Nature. Several million-dollar homes were surrounded by nature's moats. 7-year-old David M. Heiser of Overland has a flood story he will never forget. He was sitting along a storm sewer at Spencer and Cote Brilliant. When Thursday's rain started pounding, he slipped in. He grabbed onto a rock and an ambulance crew had to pull him out. Friday, a levee burst on the St. Louis County side of the Missouri River, sending water cascading onto acres of farmland. People volunteering their time to help others are being warned to take it easy. One woman collapsed from heat exhaustion after sandbagging. Rescue workers say drink plenty of water and take
President Clinton is in St. Louis for a flood summit this weekend. He arrived at Lambert Airport about an hour and a half ago. He has just, we understand, he is almost arriving at Fox High School in Arnold, where the vice president and 8 Midwest governors and a representative from Kansas are gathered to meet with the president.
You're looking right now at a live shot from Arnold at Fox High School. This is where the summit will be held. The president was expected to land after his aerial tour of St. Charles right about now, right about 10:15. He will go inside this room with the governors of 8 states, Governor Carnahan of Missouri, Governor Edgar of Illinois, and also the governors of Wisconsin, Nebraska, North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota. Only the governor of Kansas, Joan Finney, is not able to attend today, but she'll have a representative there.
And several of the nation's lawmakers and from our area will be there as well. Representative James Talent, Senator Carol Mosley Braun of Illinois, William Clay of Missouri, Representative Harold Volkmer of Missouri, Jerry Costello of Illinois. Many of our area's lawmakers there to face some of the senior cabinet members and other high-ranking administration officials about how they're going to deal with the flood damage in our area and respond to it.
Let us alert you if you weren't with us for News Channel 5 at 9. We plan to cover this meeting, carry the coverage of this summit live once it begins for however long it runs. We expect it will run sometime until afternoon time. The president is expected to stay at Fox High School until about noon. He'll then leave. Vice President Gore will remain behind along with other cabinet officials and some of the governors, senators, and representatives. Our understanding is that we'll break into small groups at that point and begin talking about how best to address the billions, and it is billions with a B, billions of dollars in damage that all of these states have been hit with this flooding.
As the president wraps up his air tour of St. Charles County aboard Marine One, he is going to be facing some anxious governors with hands outstretched for aid.
Very soon.
They're telling us this meeting will begin
until everybody is seated. Thank you very much.
As you heard there, they're telling everybody to be seated. That's an indication that the president should not be far away. Last night on News Channel 5 at 10, Governor Carnahan joined us here on the set and told us that he estimates so far that the damage just to the state of Missouri he estimates at this point $2.7 billion. Now, earlier this week, the president sent an initial package to Congress about $2.5 billion. So just the damage in Missouri alone exceeds what the president's already asked for.
But these governors and these lawmakers are optimistic anyway. They're going to ask for more, a lot more. And they're going to be there with some compelling stories about why they need more. Whether or not the government is going to pick up the rest of that tab is another issue.
And of course, this will be covered. What you're seeing right now, the picture that you see behind us, is a feed that's going to go out around the country. It can actually be picked up anywhere. And visiting press from all over the country, from Washington, from states unaffected by this flood, are here for this meeting today. And part of this, on the part of the Midwest governors, will be a selling job to get the funds they need to handle the damage, not only to homes, but to agriculture as well. And as Gene mentioned earlier, a number of the cabinet secretaries are going to be here. The Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. we'll all be here to hear from the governors.
And they won't have a hard time selling him on the need, because what he saw from the air, and as he is just landing probably at the football field at Fox High School, he is well aware of the devastation, and it's no exaggeration. I mean, we had levees breaking overnight. At 1 o'clock in the morning, another levee on the Missouri River breaks, and there's 4, 5, 6 feet of water. They've had to close Creve Coeur Airport and evacuate it. Another dozen farm families have been evacuated. It's ongoing. It's constant. It's happening right before his eyes. And again, though, the issue is, can the government afford to do more? And it doesn't look at this point like they can.
Again, the president, before arriving at Fox High School, and we don't know for a fact that he's arrived yet, took about a 1-hour tour over St. Charles County. He was looking at much of the flood devastation there. He also looked at a couple of the rivers. We understand he looked at the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the Merrimack in his flyover. He was accompanied by the governors, and as all of us well know, there is sandbagging going on everywhere today, particularly in the St. Louis area down along the River Des Peres. There's been a call for sandbaggers in St. Charles today as well.
And in Arnold, where the president is going to be soon. The Merrimack River there is expected to crest on Monday at 42 feet. That's 18 feet above flood stage. The waters are rising rapidly there. He'll be right in the midst of it with all the people who are very, very concerned. Grateful that he's there, but very concerned about what he's going to do to help them.
And we want to give you right now, while we're waiting for the president to arrive, if you would like to help out, there are many ways you can do that. To call our flood relief hotline. That number is 969-VOL5, 969-8655. Anything that you can do, as we said, sandbaggers are needed along the River Des Peres today. They're needed in St. Charles, in Arnold, and Bell Fountain Neighbors, in a number of places. And Jean just got a note about one other location.
Yes, some sandbaggers are being requested at Kimmswick, Missouri again. They're in desperate need this morning. People should go south of Highway 55 to the Imperial Main Street exit, and there they will run into a checkpoint, and they'll be told where to go to help. Again, that's in Kimmswick, Missouri, in desperate need at this time of more sandbaggers. And if you're going out sandbagging, you need to take it easy, because it's already 86 degrees out there. It's going to be a hot, humid day, and that's a lot of work in this heat.
And nobody likes to talk about the politics of all this, but obviously there are some. I think every one of the politicians involved here, Republican and Democrat, realizes that there are literally millions of people who are watching how this is going to be handled from Washington and from their local politicians. And all of them at one point are going to be up for re-election within the next couple of years. And I think people are very much going to remember how this was handled, whether the help was there for people when they needed it. And I think that is part of the reason for the summit, is that there was so much criticism of the way Hurricane Andrew was handled in Florida, that this is a chance to bring everybody together, the governors, the representatives, and Republicans and Democrats. Republicans, Kit Bond is there, as Jean said, Jim Talent is there, are all going to be in this room together to try to get something worked out, so it's a bipartisan effort.
And again, we will join the summit as it begins, but right now we're going to take you back to CNN Headline News until that time. Nope.
Well,
there he is.
Good timing. The president has just arrived at Fox High School. Again, he arrived by chopper. He's shaking hands with some of the people who are going to be involved in this summit. Again, the governors of 8 states are going to be here, along with congressmen and senators from all of those states. The president, we understand, will be, in essence, the moderator for this until he leaves at about 12 o'clock.
And then some of the cabinet members and the lawmakers will break into small groups to discuss their specific areas of tackling this flood problem and getting people back on their feet. And then Gore, of course, will stay even after the president leaves to meet with the governors and other lawmakers.
And we understand for the president, this is really almost a sound-off session, so he can hear from the governors what their needs are, how widespread the devastation is, if he didn't already know that. He's shaking hands there with Illinois Governor Jim Edgar, and you see the Vice President there as well. As Jean said, Vice President Gore will stay beyond when the President leaves to help coordinate this, but this is really going to give the governors a chance to let the President know what they're dealing with, what kind of aid they're going to need, and at this point the dollar amount just keeps rising and rising.
It does, and at this point we also don't know that there are any revelations that Clinton will have for this group, other than, as Jeff said, just listening. I don't think he's got any announcements of more aid. At least nothing has been has been leaked to us to that effect. So it's a tough position for him to be in. I mean, he's here to listen, and he's going to hear some really heart-wrenching stories, a lot of them from our area.
You see, Senator Kit Bond from Missouri there, a Republican sitting next to two Democrats. There's, of course, Missouri Congressman Richard Gephardt, the House Majority Leader, and Governor Carnahan just on the left side of your screen there. All of them will have a chance to have their say here today. Again, Governor Carnahan has estimated the damage to Missouri is $2.7 billion. And we want to remind you again, for those of you just joining in, that as soon as this starts, as soon as the president starts talking, which should be momentarily, we're going to throw it there and then let you watch the whole meeting. In fact, I think we should probably do that now.
Here he goes.
Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're starting just a bit late because we all had to come down from the airport, and we came in different ways. I do want to thank everyone for being here and say this is a rather extraordinary meeting of federal, state, local, and private sector emergency response people. We're going to try to get through a very busy agenda today, and it will be my job to try to keep us more or less on schedule, so I hope we can, because there are an awful lot of issues that have to be dealt with. I'd like to thank the governors who are here. Our host, Mel Carnahan of Missouri, Terry Branstad of Iowa, I think is here. There he is. I missed him when I went around. Who hosted me on a trip to Iowa, 2 trips to Iowa recently. Is Governor Thompson of Wisconsin here? I think he's coming. Governor Edgar of Illinois, Ben Nelson of Nebraska, Ed Schaefer of North Dakota, Arnie Carlson of Minnesota, and Walter Miller of South Dakota. I think that is all the governors who are here. I'd also like to thank the members of Congress who are here or who are scheduled to come. We have Senator Barbara Mikulski, who's at the table, whose committee has jurisdiction over the operations of emergency management. Senator Kit Bond from Missouri, our host. Senator Bill Bradley is here somewhere or on the way, whose family farm in Missouri is apparently underwater. He may be here in his private capacity rather than as a United States Senator. We're delighted to be in the host district of the Majority Leader of the United States House of Representatives, Dick Gephardt, and I want him to say a word in a moment since we're camped out here in his backyard. Congressman Bruce Vento from Minnesota, Congressman Peter Hoagland from Nebraska, Congressman Mengy, Congressman Volkmer is coming, I think, and Congressman Pomeroy is here. And I think Senator Wellstone from Minnesota is scheduled to come. Let me also tell you, all of you from all these states, that we had, the Vice President and I and our administration team had an extensive meeting yesterday in Washington with the congressional delegations from all the affected states. And you would be very interested to know that not only did virtually every member of Congress from every state here represented show up, but there was also a rather substantial representation from interested members of Congress from other states who just wanted to be there, get a briefing, and know what they could do to help. It was a very, very large and very impressive turnout. And I told them all we were coming here today. I invited them here, but most of them did their work on this issue yesterday at that meeting. Did I recognize Congressman Wheat? I don't know if I did, but he was here. Thank you. I also want to say that there are the heads or secretaries of 10 federal departments or agencies in our administration are here working together. And I'd like to briefly acknowledge them so you'll know who they are and ask them to at least raise their hands. James Lee Witt, the Director of FEMA, Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Espy, Secretary of Transportation, Federico Pena, Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown, who just became a grandfather to twins. He's only 35 years old. We can't figure out how it happened. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Henry Cisneros, Secretary of Labor, Bob Reich, the head of the Corps of Engineers, General Williams, the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Keim, and the head of the National Weather Service, Dr. Joe Friday, is also here. And he and the Vice President had a very interesting conversation about what caused this flood. They're going to talk a little in a minute. The Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Leon Panetta. And I'd also like to recognize in the audience the head of the American Red Cross, Elizabeth Dole, who flew down with us. And the Red Cross has done wonderful work, and we thank you for being here. Now, I'd like to ask Congressman Gebhardt if he'd like to say anything on behalf of his district, and then I want to recognize the Vice President for opening remarks.
President, I want to welcome, on behalf of the people of Jefferson County, Missouri, I want to welcome all of these distinguished guests. I think in the flight we saw an unprecedented tragedy, and this is an unprecedented response by you and your administration. Vice President Gore was here on Monday and gave hope to people and saw the immensity of this problem. And we really appreciate, I know everyone here, the citizens, appreciate your being here. Finally, I would say that I was out at one of the levees in my district the other day, and a man who was leading the effort of sandbagging for 3 days and nights broke down and cried. And he said, please help us. And he said, please pray for us. And I think as we go to work today to try to make our governmental response more efficient, we do have to say a prayer, because it is obvious that this tragedy is in the hands of God as well as our hands, and should give us impetus to do our very best to help people at a time of great need. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say in response to that, I think it's fair to say that all of us in the administration who have been to this region have been very moved by what we have seen, both the pain that people have experienced and their enormous courage and often their great good humor in dealing with this crisis. I also want to thank the people in the rest of the United States who have sent help of all kinds. We even have seen help coming in from South Florida, which suffered so much from Hurricane Andrew last year. I do want to say, too, that we are here to deal with basically two great issues. One is, what are we going to do right now while everybody is up to their ears in alligators? And the second is, how are we going to keep this effort going over the long run so that we can see these areas through to full recovery? There has been a disjuncture in the past, I think, between what happens in the short run. There's all kind of questions about whether we've had enough coordination or not. I think we've really worked through that this time. But also whether the federal government can stay in the long run. And there is an almost collective emotional process that people go through. When it first hits, folks are brave and good-humored and courageous, but then the reality of the losses that sink in and a grief takes over. And then if everyone's not at least doing their best, a lot of anger can come in the wake of that. And our goal is to just be a good partner and to sensitively know that people will have to go through an emotional cycle, and the whole states will go through an emotional cycle. But we don't want people to think that they have been abandoned when the immediate emergency is over. So we're going to start this meeting with a discussion of the present conditions and what we can do in the short run. Then we're going to go to a discussion of long-term relief. And then at the end of the discussion, we're going to move to the legislation that is now moving through Congress, what it means, and where we go from here. Let me just introduce the Vice President with this thought. I read the other day that a 61-year-old retired state police officer in Quincy, Illinois, was fighting to save that bridge up there. And as you know, unfortunately, the Fabius levee broke, and in spite of their best efforts, and the bridge has now been closed. So there's no link for about 200 miles now across the Mississippi River. But this police officer said it's a shame the rest of the country can't come together like this to solve its problems. I thought that was such a simple and yet brilliant statement. I hope that we can come away from this with the sense that we've all done our very best to work together to solve this problem, and that we will take the powerful example of human courage that we have seen in countless places across these states to follow that. Again, I want to say to all of you, I thank you for taking your time to come today. We will run through a rather brisk schedule, and I want to begin with the Vice President, who has been to this region twice and who I think has done a very good job, especially when I was away on the G7 meeting, and I'm very grateful to him. But he has a little insight on exactly what the scope of the damage is and how it all came about, and I think it would be good to sort of set the stage with his remarks. Mr. Vice President?
Well, Mr. President, this is about people, and it's a heartbreaking tragedy for the families who've been affected by it, and yet it's also a story, as you've said, of everybody pulling together, primarily at the local level and the state level where the brunt of the work is being done, but your team really has pulled together. The people you've mentioned are joined by a lot of the emergency operations directors for every agency involved in this effort, also making up the crowd here. And the parts of your government that deal with the scientific analysis of what is going on have also been pulling together in an unprecedented way. I'm going to take 2 minutes to present 4 pictures. They are the result of analysis by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in Secretary Brown's Commerce Department, the Defense Department, which has put some new instruments on its satellites. They were put there recently, not specifically for this flood, but they are producing some startling images. The Central Intelligence Agency has been involved in producing imagery, and I will show one image that has never been seen because it was just produced last night. They stayed up most of the night putting this image together, and Dr. Joe Friday, from the head of the National Weather Service, is going to help me with this. Just very briefly, and Dr. Friday, you get me out of trouble if I get into it here. What the consensus among the people who study these things is that what's caused this situation is an extremely unusual weather pattern where there is much hotter than normal air in a persistent pattern over the Atlantic and Atlantic coastal area. And the weather forecasting professionals are saying that they don't remember anything like this in their careers. There may have been something previously, but they've never seen anything like this before. And it's just staying there. They described it as a little bit like Jell-O in the sense that the weather, the winds will push it, but it just comes right back. It stays right there. Normally, the jet stream pushes weather systems across the continent, but because this is staying there, it's turning north right when it encounters this huge mass of very hot air. With the warm, moist air coming in constantly from the Gulf, and this huge convergence zone with the contrast between the very hot air and very cold, it's just wringing all that moisture out every single day. Typically, as you all know very well, in the afternoon and the evening, practically every day it rains. The area where it rains moves back and forth a little bit throughout the upper Midwest and the Midwest, but it's been raining in thunderstorms every single day. Now, there are basically 2 kinds of flooding that all these people have been dealing with. The part that has been the most visible has been the rivers coming out of their boundaries, of course, and covering a much larger area. And it's important to point out, as Senator Bond often says, that a lot of the flooding that is causing serious damage is not really visible because it's way up in the tributaries, in the Grand and the upper reaches of the Missouri. And of course, the Des Moines River and the Raccoon River caused that problem 6 days ago, and just yesterday, the Red River in Fargo flowing north created the situation up there. Okay, the third one shows all right, now this is this brand new image that I referred to. The second kind of flooding that has not received the same kind of attention is moisture that pools up on the flat farmland. Now, this is a brand new satellite image that shows soil moisture. And the darker it is, the more moist it is. And what you see here on the border between Minnesota and Iowa, South Dakota and Nebraska is a very shallow and temporary Great Lake. It is as if another Great Lake has been added to the map of the United States. Very shallow and temporary, but the damage in this area is extensive. Okay, and the final image is just a before and after satellite picture of much of the region. We will pass small copies of these around. You see the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Illinois, before and after. The cloud cover makes it a little hard to see, but you can see, for example, the normal size of the channel and what it is here. Dr. Joe Friday will be available throughout the session today, and his experts are available. And a lot of folks, when I was here on Monday, wanted to know why. And as Dick Gephardt says, there's a lot of that about that we will never answer. But in any event, one final point, Mr. President. They say that while all of this is unpredictable, their best guess is that this persistent weather pattern could last for several more weeks. And so what we see now is potentially something that we'll have to be dealing with for some time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now call on the White House Chief of Staff, Mac McLarty, to make a few remarks. I have asked Mac to oversee the White House coordination of this to ensure that it receives the best possible attention within the White House, and that we continue the very close coordination we've had with all these government departments represented here today. Mac?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. We have a full agenda, a number of important and critical matters to be discussed, so thus my comments will achieve appropriate brevity and coherence. We feel that trips and efforts to visit here and other flood sites underscore a genuine commitment and concern about the people that have been impacted by these natural disasters. They were demonstrated in the President's 2 trips to Iowa, the Vice President's trips. Mike Espy, I think, has been to the Midwest at least on 3 occasions, Secretary Pena and others. And you really can't have the depth of understanding and appreciation unless you've been to one of these areas and seen the impact on people's lives. The FEMA response under Director Witt has been a very positive one. James Lee is a can-do, get-it-done type person, and we're very proud to have him in our administration. The state and local response, as the President noted, has been exemplary. The volunteer efforts, and with Elizabeth Dole here today and other organizations, has made a real difference, has made the difference in many cases. And the human spirit has been something that has inspired us all. So in large measure, the safety and the public health issues are being met to the fullest extent possible. But there is a hole, as Senator Mikulski commented, after about 2 months. There are longer-term issues, particularly relating to economic recovery. This is a big problem. It's going to require a broad response on the part of all phases of government and a multifaceted response. And you can see our entire administration is engaged, as we should be, to hopefully achieve the maximum results, or put in another way, the maximum help in a thoughtful and a cost-effective manner. We want to connect with each of the local and state agencies and provide the best and most effective assistance possible. To do that, obviously, is going to require a carefully and thoughtfully coordinated effort. That is absolutely essential. And let me really underscore in an appropriate way that we have some very capable and strong leaders in the cabinet secretaries that are represented here today. They are caring, they are concerned, they are knowledgeable, and they are professionals. And as importantly, they are team players, and thus the interagency coordination to provide the maximum assistance can be accomplished. They want to provide real help and real assistance to each of you. Dick, as a youngster in Arkansas, we grew up with the St. Louis Cardinals and Mark Twain. And Twain, I think, once commented, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Well, we believe we're on the right track, and we don't intend to just sit there. We are committed to working closely with you in a responsive, in a consistent, and in a coordinated manner. And we look forward to the meeting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we begin to call on the governors, I'd like to ask Secretary Espy and our FEMA Director, James Lee Witt, to just briefly, for about 5 minutes each, review the current situation in the region and an overview of the present federal response. They have spent more time here personally by quite a long ways than anyone else in our administration, and I think it's important that that their views get out and that they have a chance just to make a few introductory remarks. So I'd like Mr. Witt and Secretary Espy to talk in whatever order they have decided to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's good to be here. I hope that our response is going well with you. I want you to know that between Washington, D.C. and the state and local emergency management structure, I have never in my life seen such a strong partnership working to respond to these victims of this disaster. It is incredible. In Washington, I set up a conference call every morning at 9:30 with all of the state directors of the affected states, with all of the federal agencies in on this conference call as well. And every morning we get exactly what each state needs or any issues that come up, and all the agencies are on that conference call so they can respond right then to make a difference. And I think that has made a tremendous difference. Every day at 11 o'clock, all the federal agencies convene. We all go through a briefing every day at 11 o'clock to make sure that we're meeting those needs that you have down on that state and local level. We're working 24 hours a day at headquarters at FEMA with all the federal agencies working together as a strong partner. The difference is that we are working together from the White House all the way to the courthouse, and that's what's important. Let me briefly go through state by state just shortly in the disaster application, and I know you're concerned about some of that. Minnesota, we have taken 353 applications in our disaster application centers. Wisconsin, we've taken 1,614. Illinois, we've taken 1,652. Iowa, we've taken 5,266. Missouri, we've taken 4,501, totaling about 13,386 applications. Those people that are coming in for temporary housing, we are returning those checks to them less than 3 to 5 days. And that's incredibly fast. We're working on trying to get the other checks out in less than 9 days, so we can get immediate relief to those disaster victims. We have 229 counties declared in the 5 states at this time, with more that probably will be added. The Red Cross has sheltered 3,000 to 4,000 people to date. We have between 20 and 30,000 homes that have been affected by this flood, and probably will have more as the flood waters come up down in Missouri and on down. We have 23 disaster application centers open, with more to be added in the next few days. We also have a tele-restoration center open with the 1-800 number. Also, we have a support tele-restoration open in Maryland by volunteers to help support the one in Denton. So we do not miss that applicant's call. When they call, they will get a free line, and that's important to try to keep down the frustration as much as we can, because I have seen so much frustration in those individual homeowners with their basements flooded and they're losing all of their possessions. But I just want you to know, particularly governors, how much your state emergency management people have done, and down on the local level as well. They have worked very hard, and we're going to do everything we can to support them and take care of your constituents in each of your states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary Espy.
President, you, of course, have been up here many times, and you have declared this as an awful disaster. Well, that just about sums it up. I've been up here in the upper Midwest touring 5 times now. I've been to South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and, of course, with Governor Branstad several times to Iowa. And just as Mr. Witt has said, I've never seen anything like this. I'm from Mississippi, a state which, of course, is adjacent to the river. And down there in Mississippi, we expect some annual flooding. Every spring, we just look forward to it, just expect it. It's coming. But honestly, in my personal experience, I've never seen anything like this. Wettest season on record, 100-year flood. Losses are going to be tremendous. And as it relates to agricultural losses and reduction in yields and claims, I can make some estimates. I have to first say, and couch it with the right caveat, that this is a moving target. It's still raining in parts of the region, it's still flooding, and of course a lot of this land, not now underwater, will become so. So these estimates will change and they will increase. But, and also I should say that on August 11th, Mr. President, we'll have the most accurate assessment because our National Agricultural Statistical Survey comes in at that point, and we'll be able to give you, through a survey of thousands of farmers, just what the situation looks like. But as I sit here today, of the 9 states constituting the upper Midwest here, we have about 20+ million acres adversely affected by flooding or excessive moisture. Of that number, we have about 8 million acres underwater, or crops that have been prevented from planting at all. As I said, it's too early to tell with any great degree of accuracy, but certain things are happening. The window is closing now for all of these planting decisions. It's safe to say now that if you have not planted any crop by this time, you are unlikely to. And if you have planted, for instance, soybeans, it's also safe to say that if those soybeans have been standing underwater for 2 or 3 days, it's probably going to be a complete loss. And I've seen corn already having been planted that by this time should be up to my waist or my chest level, which right now is around my ankles. So we know that we will have some severe losses and certainly some reductions in yields. And since the 1st of June, we've already reduced our yield estimate by 2 times already. Now, this affects us all because we know that this part of the country is extremely fruitful, if you will. This area of the country produces about $45 billion in annual agricultural yields. In this part of the country, we grow 2/3 of all of our corn and soybeans and 1/3 of all of our wheat. So every American ought to be concerned about what we're seeing here today. We have responded. We are responding, and we will continue to respond. President Clinton asked us to do 2 things. Do it quick and do it right. And we are doing that right now. In fact, the director of FEMA and I have already done something I believe that has never been done before. We have co-located offices. In addition to the FNS and the ASCS and the Farmers Home Office and the crop insurance offices already existing, we in the USDA have a presence right now in every FEMA Disaster Assistance Center. So it's our goal to have a one-stop shop, and we are doing that. I could go through individual state claim losses and all of that, Mr. President, but that certainly would go beyond my 5 minutes. Just simply let me say that we, through a multitude of programs, are able to offer immediate assistance on a short-term basis, on an intermediate basis, and on a long-term basis. For instance, we can provide emergency food stamps, and already we've gotten claims from Illinois and Missouri to offer this. And when we receive the food stamp request, we can turn it around in the same day. Already in Illinois, we've given out about $30,000 in food stamp value, and we'll continue to do that. We have a number of homes in the Farmers Home Program, where we've declared a moratorium on mortgage repayments. We have a number of vacancies that we can make available to Mr. Witt and to the governors. Within the disaster assistance avenue, I've talked to a number of members of Congress, senators, and governors. We have done everything within our discretionary authority to give the farmers the kind of flexibility they need in this period of distress. We've done everything under statute except forgive the repayment of the advanced deficiency payments. We can't do that because we do not have the authority, but suffice it to say, everything else from the opening up the farmer's own reserve or giving extended time to repay loans or anything like that, we have done. And when we receive the resources incident to the disaster assistance package, we can do a lot more. It's our expectation to deliver the claims within 2 weeks. So with that, Mr. President, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. With regard to the co-location of offices, I also want to point out that FEMA has brought in 20 SBA specialists into the teleregistration center, and there are small business people who are now filling out the applications for aid by telephone. And this is also something that has really been without precedent, particularly between the SBA and FEMA. I neglected to introduce earlier in that regard the Director of the Small Business Administration, Erskine Bowles from North Carolina, and also Congressman Talent. I apologize for that. We're glad to be joined. And Governor Thompson, I introduced you before you got here, but we're glad to see you. I'd like to now ask our host governor, Governor Carnahan. We'll go through a whole series of issues here, and if you don't feel something is adequately discussed, feel free to interject, but I think it's important that we try to stay on the agenda. And I'd like to ask Governor Carnahan to begin by discussing short-term emergency response and public assistance delivery.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you saw coming down here today, we've got a loss of a magnitude that we don't understand, we've never seen before. As the Secretary said, there's many areas that expect flooding, but this has just been sustained. It's been higher and longer, coming from two directions in our case, both the Mississippi and the Missouri, and so the resources are badly, badly taxed. As much as we talk from the government side, as we'll do today, and we appreciate the opportunity to do that, we recognize that people are fighting, frankly, for their lives and their livelihoods, because those are really turned upside down. And there's a huge volunteer work that's been going on and a self-help work that I'm sure we're committed to complementing. I was in western Missouri at Mound City yesterday, an area where the river is all the way out of across its levees, and it goes from the hill country to the hill country, and at some places was 7 or 8 miles wide, like something you saw today. And one of the county officials and I were talking that we were going to have this meeting today, and he said, well, if you have the chance, tell the president that when it comes to helping these farmers, see if you can't get over to some grant assistance. They've got more loans and they know what to do with. He says they'll take the loans. If that's all there is, they'll take them. But I'm afraid they'll be in further trouble. So any way that we could carve any of this relief, and I know that would be cutting new ground, it's not the way it's been done, but it is what is needed in order to really get these folks on their feet. And I know that may be part of the long-term part, but it's also the short-term. These people were totally without a crop, entirely wiped out, and their livelihood is just on hold and going backwards for the time being. We'll also need some help in the recovery, on employment of dislocated workers, on waiving the cost-sharing requirements. That's going to overtax the ability of both states, our state in particular, and the local communities. And I know that that is being thought about, but that is going to be a priority for us.
Thank you very much, Governor. A little later in the program, I'm going to ask the Secretary of Labor, Bob Rice, to talk about the dislocated worker issue. It is a major issue. But before we move this topic, I'd like to ask General Williams from the Corps of Engineers, if you have anything you want to say about the emergency work to repair the public and private facilities and what you're doing to try to minimize the damage.
Yes, sir. As Mr. Witt explained, we're working very closely with FEMA, and that Department of Defense has been co-located with FEMA in all their offices, both at the national and the field level. There's two things that the Corps of Engineers is directly involved in right now during the flood fight. One is under our own Corps authorities, Public Law 84-99, and that's where we're out providing whatever assistance is being asked for by the states, both in the flood control and also in providing supplies such as about 15 million sandbags, a couple hundred pumps. We've got about several thousand dollars invested in the water supply. FEMA has directed us to do a water supply mission up in Des Moines, so we're supplying 2.4 million gallons of potable water per day. We're also involved in supplying other materials such as pumps, plastic material to put on the levees. We're also involved in doing other technical assistance, engineering assistance to those that need it. That's what's ongoing now. We also have a navigation problem, and we've been working very closely with the navigation industry and the other folks along the river. As you well know, the navigation is closed from Cairo north, essentially. We do have locks 1 through 11 that are open on the upper Mississippi, and it's going to be a while before we get the rest of the locks open down to Cairo area.
Let me ask you one quick follow-up question. That when Governor Branstad and I were in Iowa the other day, and we saw this vast lake that essentially went from Des Moines all the way to the Mississippi River, the kind of thing the Vice President was talking about there. And one of the people who was there with us said that we had to be very careful how we drained off this water in order not to aggravate the problems of the rivers being too high. Is that a serious issue?
We have a situation, if you're referring to dams that we have above Des Moines, Saylorville, for example. There are 3 primary reservoirs that the Corps operates in Iowa, and those are the ones that have any significant impact on the upper Mississippi. All 3 of those dams are way above their flood pool stage, so we've tried to hold back the releases so that we don't increase any damage beyond what they've already have. And as soon as the crests are down through that area, we're going to have to start releasing water so you don't continue to have those dams stressed and create additional problems. So we're watching very carefully and trying to orchestrate the best you can the water levels both in the tributary streams and the main rivers.
With regard to the issue that Governor Carnahan raised, this is not exactly responsive because you talked about farm losses, but I do think it's important to point out that FEMA does have a modest program to deal with personal losses of families, and I thought I'd let Mr. Witt just briefly state that again so people who have been wiped out of their homes or jobs and don't have anything would know about it. Would you just briefly say what it is?
All you have to do is tell the farmer to go to
the disaster
applicant. Tell the farmer to go to the Disaster Application Center and talk to one of the representatives there, because if he lost personal items, and this one is, isn't it?
Yeah.
If he had personal losses, he might be eligible for one of the grants that we have available for them.
I'd like to, if I might, move on to another issue which affects more people in Iowa than any other place, but that's the lack of potable water. And I'd like to ask Governor Branstad to talk to us a little about that. This, I believe,